Chapter 4 In the Shadow of the Forest. After spending several days following the coast and keeping an eye out for the signs Sitara had indicated, Emma spotted two figures on the beach in the early morn of the 20th of the 7th moon. Once the crew had traveled to shore and Sitara made herself known, they were greeted by her uncle Radovan and her cousin Havriil, who led the crew inland. Upon arriving at their caravan, Havriil's twin, Damian, dropped down out of a tree, nearly assaulting Sitara before she was overwhelmed by her family's welcome. A beautiful barefooted lady, who seemed to dance even as she ran, was the first to reach Sitara. The resemblance was striking. Akash and Kasumi were placing bets on whether she was the captain's sister when Sitara introduced the woman as her mother, Svetlana. Soon, two more women, who appeared older than Svetlana, joined the embrace, and Sitara presented her aunts, Krasava and Sora. The Krechi greeted Sitara in turn, until the crowd parted for an elderly woman wrapped in an exquisite shawl, descending slowly from one of the wagons. Her thin lips curled into a smile around a pipe with an impressively long stem, wisps of smoke curling about her silvered waves as she approached, her proud bearing far exceeding her wizened body. Sitara stepped forward to meet her, and the old woman raised her chin expectantly. She leaned over to kiss the woman's leathery cheek before being pulled into a tight hug. "Welcome home, little Danica." One by one, Sitara introduced her crew to her grandmother, Dragica, matriarch and lore-keeper of the Krechi. Dasha recognized Danica as the name of one of the jewels of Visitori's cloak, the Morning Star. Akash knew both Awami and Ashib enough to realize Sitara had been named for the same star in both tongues. Many of her kin also affectionately referred to Sitara as what Dasha understood to be her deed name, Derya, of the sea. In addition to the crew, Sitara introduced her family to Viz Leany, who beheld the ship in awe, admiring its beautiful and pious craftsmanship. Seeing their quiet murmurs in response to the ship's figurehead and name, she suddenly understood why she had not heard the tale of Leany growing up, given the circumstances of her mother and father. While Sitara found Svetlana to be in good spirits, she could sense her mother's resignation. Over the next few days, the crew and the Krechi exchanged many stories, songs, and dances. Some of the crew were entirely too curious to hear stories about their captain from her childhood. Emrys regaled his eager audience with many tales of the adventures of the brave crew of Viz Leany. Svetlana was very pleased her daughter seemed to have finally found employment better suited to her temperament, given her difficulties with her prior contracts. And the crew soon learned where Sitara's grace came from when they discovered Svetlana was herself an exceptional dancer, though her ethereal manner of movement was markedly different from her daughter's own dynamic style. After introducing Akash as a mashallah, one who may affect the dream, Dragica unabashedly inquired after his role in her granddaughter's personal life. Slightly exasperated, Sitara firmly asserted Akash was a friend and an invaluable member of her crew, nothing more. After affectionately chastising her grandmother's shameless behavior, Sitara wandered off into the dances. Turning back to Akash, Dragica remarked that it was a pity, but she did not believe such a thing was in the cards for their Derya.
Akash took the opportunity to ask Dragica her wisdom concerning his strange page of Awami script. Looking over it, she confirmed that it was indeed ancient, from a time long before the crossing. When he asked for her aid in translating it, she agreed she could divulge some of its meaning, but that he would need to speak with the Leranovna elder for the rest. The page spoke of a mysterious being named Sikarza, he of broken glass, as well as an artifact called the Batiri Sarul, the stone of the sky. Taking a hit off her pipe, the formidable Krechi elder also warned him that if any harm should befall her granddaughter in the course of his search for her, it would come back upon him.
Though thrilled at his progress and a little unsettled, Akash enjoyed the rest of the evening and his smokes. After many rounds of dancing, Sitara finally took a break to dine with her companions. As they partook of delicious food and drink, Akash lightly inquired whether Sitara knew of any Awami possessing powers such as his, or perhaps other abilities such as laying curses upon others. Giving him an uncomfortably astute stare, She answered only with a knowing, coy smile.
Though Dasha enjoyed being back in the company of her people under the canopy of the Great Redwoods, seeing the Krejci embrace Sitara's return left her feeling subdued. Sitara finally understood the significant glances cast Dasha's way since their arrival, when the Krejci revealed that her clan, the Laranovna, had changed their route, leaving their deep inland home paths for the southern coast of the forest. After about a fortnight, the crew bid the lively Krejci farewell and Viz Leany followed the coast south. Nearly a week later, on the 14th of the 8th moon, Viz Leany came upon Calica, the same village from which Dasha had booked passage to Rakosis with Akasha's adoptive father. Still at a distance, Imris noted smoke rising from the village. Weighing anchor, the crew rowed to shore, and as they approached, they saw multiple fires, but strangely heard no commotion or panicked cries. Reaching the edge of the village, they soon realized why. No one was there.
Walking through the streets, they found multiple signs that Calica had been recently ransacked, but not a single villager was to be found, not even a corpse. The village appeared empty, abandoned. As Dasha and Akash continued deeper into the village, Sitara and Mezi headed to the beach to search for signs of raiders. Just south of the village, Sitara saw a strange divot in the sand. Upon closer inspection, Mezi recognized it as the mark of a Tatoan assault barge running up on the beach, the kind of barge used by slavers. Realizing what had happened, they rushed back to the longboat, calling out for the others.
Evidence of plundering continued as Dasha and Akash made their way through Calica. Just outside the village, they came upon an Oami caravan showing similar signs of violence. Dasha's horror intensified as she recognized the wagons. She darted about the caravan, gathering up some personal effects before sprinting back towards the beach where Sitara was already signaling Viz Leany to make ready to sail. They exchanged what they had discovered as they rowed back to the ship before the captain looked solemnly to Mezi and asked her what they were in for.
Returning to Viz Leany, the captain wasted no time in mobilizing the crew to make all speed towards Alcara. Once they were on course, she called everyone together on deck to explain what they had discovered on shore. It seemed Tatoan slavers, deciding to look outside of their own nation for resources, had raided the village, capturing the Dashan peasants, as well as an Oami caravan, Dasha's clan. From the relatively fresh signs they had found in Calica, the barge could not have gone far, and if they made haste, Viz Leany could catch them well before they reached Alcara. From what Mezi had told them, the barge would likely have employed a unit of Marines, perhaps a dozen, in addition to 24 rowers, who would either be slaves or soldiers. Excluding Masha, Viz Leany's crew numbered 24, including the captain. She acknowledged the odds were not in their favor, though their chances would be improved if the slaves could be turned against their overseers. That said, she confirmed she could not, in good conscience, allow the Tatoan's atrocity to go unanswered, even had it not been Dasha's kin who were stolen, not when there was a chance to save them. Sitara looked to her crew, declaring she would not command them to follow her on such a deadly endeavor. Rather, she fervently implored them to help her, for Dasha's family, for the villagers, for the slaves, for the freedom of all those who lived by and traveled the sea. Kamal spoke for the crew, who were moved by the captain's impassioned entreaty, answering that it was the right thing to do, no matter the odds, and they would follow her. As they set about to devise a plan for how to deal with a ship full of trained Tatoan warriors, Emrys remarked that it was going to make one hell of a story.
Catching up with the Tatoan assault barge, Mezi recognized the ship as Mastiga Tau Theo, Scourge of God, captained by Ematiro Kima Spiros Antonis, also known as the Bloody Wave. Sitara hailed the ship, offering to turn in Mezi and Diallo for the bounties on their heads. After the captain's negotiations, Antonis' guards led the two below decks. As Mezi and Diallo descended below, they counted a few dozen rowers chained to their benches. Entering the hold, they found it full of people, some who resembled Dasha. When one of the Marines went to grab Mezi's bindings, she wrenched her arms apart and launched a kick at his face. As he fell, her foot caught him in the throat, and she stomped down with a loud crunch. Grabbing the other guard flanking them, Diallo rams him into a beam, stunning him as they grapple for control. With 2 soldiers remaining, Mezzy jammed her elbow into one, knocking the wind out of him as the other went for his sword and took a swing at Mezzy. Luckily, her armor absorbed the worst of the impact. Grabbing the fallen Marine's blade, Mezzy retaliated, driving a sword through his chest. Coughing up blood, he slumped over the sword. The 3rd Marine swung and missed Mezzy, and she returned with a slash of her own. As her blade struck true, the guard wrestling Diallo gained the upper hand and started to choke him. Mezzy rushed to Diallo's aid, cracking the guard's skull with the pommel of her sword. Unfortunately, the soldier she had abandoned took the opportunity to knock Mezzy in the back of the head. Through her daze, Mezzy felt herself overcome with rage as she surged forward and ran the man through, lifting him up into the air for a moment before his body slid off the blade. With all 4 Marines down, Mezzy and Diallo took their keys and started freeing the captives. They were soon joined by a large, strong Tautoan woman named Iphigenia, who had been taken captive with the Laranovna clan. As they were freeing the rest of the prisoners, a pair of guards spotted them and sounded the alarm. A vicious battle ensued, with Mezzy and Diallo attempting to fight their way up from below decks, while Kasumi set about freeing the slave rowers. Rallying the freed slaves, Mezzy directed them to the top deck, and the crowd surged forward and upwards.
As Mezzy and Diallo disappeared into the hold, the captain made something of a show of inspecting the reward offered by Antonis, and inquired if he would be interested in any other trades of goods this day. Akash and Kasumi bickered and bumbled about as they carried crates to and fro. With all eyes on the continuing negotiations, Kasumi dropped unnoticed off the edge of the barge and began to climb towards one of the portholes below. Several minutes passed before they heard shouting from below decks, and Antonis' head snapped towards the sound. As he began to bark orders and the Marines turned to respond, Sitara interrupted his commands with her swords, launching the surprise attack as her crew leapt onto the barge from the deck of Viz Leany. Sitara, Dasha, and Akash engaged Captain Artemis at first, until Akash saw some of the crew struggling against the Marines and went to assist him. The captain's blades met again and again, and as the contest continued, they found themselves roughly matched. Suddenly, Dasha threw herself onto Artemis, driving her blade through his chest and pinning him to the deck. As Dasha rose to her feet and tried to recover from the shock of what she had done, Sitara rushed to aid her crew, but even as she slashed her way through the Marines between them, ahead of her she saw one of her men fall, then another, and another. Suddenly, the deck was overrun with a stream of slaves pouring out from below decks, rushing their overseers. As Mezzy and Kasumi reached the top deck, the battle was all but over. As the slaves overwhelmed the remaining Marines, though scattered amongst the enemy, they saw many of their own. With the rest of the crew providing what assistance they could, Dasha and Diallo were able to save Adam, Wazi, Jian, and Jyotish, all of whom were gravely injured. Shakil, Namat, and Kamal, however, had succumbed to their wounds.
With a vengeance, the newly freed slaves strung up Antonis' body to the mast and rechristened the vessel Sea's Wrath. Adowu Adir, one of the rowers who had stepped forward to lead the freed slaves, gave his condolences and offered whatever assistance he could provide to support the crew and the freed captives. Stating that the captives would be the first to be fed, it was decided that the next morning the 2 ships would head for Vertel, with Viz Leany heading into port for supplies before continuing north to the remains of Calico.
The crew of Viz Leany bid their fallen farewell and gave them over to the sea in the tradition of Ashib sailors before setting sail. A subdued lull fell over the ship. While Dasha was relieved her family and the villagers were safe, she confided to Sitara she felt partly responsible that they had lost crew in helping her clan. Sitara assured her that the fault was not hers, that they had given their lives for a cause they believed in, though her own words sounded hollow to her ears. Emrys retreated to the crow's nest, seldom appearing and only to refill his skin, his usual joyous singing reduced to a mournful murmur on the sea wind. One sleepless night, Sitara climbed up to join him in drinking. When she lamented not reaching Kamal, Shakil, and Namat in time, that they would still be here had she not led them into this, The inebriated bard gently advised her that, if she were looking for blame, she would find none there.